Desa Sunyavadi Paschyata Desa Tarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sam Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Sigora Bhakta Bunda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. Hope you can see the screen.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So we will begin. Prabhupada left for New York. We are beginning another chapter, chapter 25. Our master has not finished his work. Let's see what they're trying to say here. There was no warning that Srila Prabhupada's health would break down, or if there were, no one heeded it. As he moved from his devotees in San Francisco to his devotees in New York, no one passed any words that Swamiji should slow down. After the 5.5 hour jet flight, Prabhupada spoke of a blockading in his ears, but he seemed all right. Right through the festive airport reception is strong at 22nd Avenue to his, and by his presence, oh, I'm sorry, connection is in and out. Now also bad.
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's just it's freezing every now and again. So.
Thank you. Sorry. To his New York disciples, he appeared dazzling and lovable, and by his presence, his glances and his words, he increased their Krishna consciousness. To them, his advanced age, now nearing 72 years, was but another of his transcendental features. He was their strength, and they never thought to consider, consider his strength. In the temple, speaking from a new dais behind a velvet-covered lectern, Prabhupada said, "In my absence, things have improved. New paintings hung in the freshly painted white walls. Otherwise, it was the same tiny storefront where he had begun his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He had written them that he wanted to enter the new building on his return, but they had failed, and they had foolishly lost $6,000. But without dwelling on this, Prabhupada made a more important observation. His disciples, despite the physical absence of their spiritual master, had made progress by following his instructions. As he sat looking happily at the freshly painted walls and the bright faces of his disciples, Prabhupada explained how one obtained expertise in Krishna consciousness by submissively following the spiritual master. He gave the example that although an engineer's apprentice may not be expert, if he turns a screw under the direct supervision of the expert engineer, he is acting as an expert. Many of the devotees were relieved to hear that. They knew that giving up material desires was difficult and that they weren't going to become completely pure devotees overnight. Brahmananda had even written a poem stating that if, after many lifetimes, he would chant one round of Hare Krishna mantra with attention, he would consider this the greatest success. But Prabhupada was explaining that even if they weren't expert in love of Krishna, if they worked under an expert, they were also acting as experts. The next morning, with the fanfare of Prabhupada's arrival passed, it became apparent that just how dependent the devotees were on the spiritual master. The attendance was down to the dozen or so regulars. And Prabhupada silently entered the storefront and began to lead the chanting. But when the moment came for the devotees to sing in response, and Prabhupada heard their first chorus, he looked out to them, startled and compassionate. Now he could hear they were weak, more like croaking than singing. They had deteriorated in his absence. The kirtans had changed while he had been away. And now he was hearing what the devotees were like, helpless souls, croaking without joy or word. Um, Interesting. So Prabhupada returns and looks like there was a nice welcoming of him. Prabhupada had a long flight, 5.5 hours. He had a blockading in the years. So he came, if people find him very lovable, and they loved him as well. In the temple, they find some changes, nice arrangement, new paint, good dyes and everything. The improvements has done. Prabhupada seems to be a little impressed with the improvement, even though he was not there, even though they lost $6,000 and everything. But he stressed one thing, that one cannot be pure overnight, but as long as we work under the direction of a pure devotee, that will be considered as pure. So it gave them some solace, some relief. They were worried, we are continuing with some of our bad activities probably. But they felt that, at least we are trying our best to hear. Um, um, so now, in the morning, they came, Prabhupada noticed that attendance was down to the dozen or so regulars, and Prabhupada silently entered the store and began to lead the chanting. So he noticed that the morning program was not well. People's kirtan and chanting was not very good. It's more like croaking than singing. So there he finds that, since the time he left, they were not doing well. Anyway, let's see what happens.
Srila Prabhupada lectured from Chaitanya Charitamrita. When flying from San Francisco, I noticed that the plane was flying above an ocean of clouds. When I came from India by boat, I saw an ocean of water, and on that plane I saw an ocean of clouds extending as far as you can see. Above the clouds is the sun, but when we come down to the clouds and lands, everything in New York is dim and clouded, but the sun is still shining. Those clouds cannot cover the whole world. They cannot even cover the whole United States, which is no more than a speck in the universe. From an airplane, we can see skyscrapers as very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, all this material nonsense is insignificant. As a living entity, I am very insignificant, and by tendencies to come down. But the sun doesn't have the come down tendency. It is always above the God of Maya, clouds of Maya. A new boy raised his hand. Why is it that one person, one soul, comes to Krishna and other doesn't? Prabhupada replied with another question. Why is one soul in the Bari and another has come to the Krishna temple? He paused, but no one could reply. Because one wants to be here and the other doesn't, he explained. It is a question of free will. If we use it properly, we can go to Krishna. Otherwise, we will stay down in the material world. Everyone had something to ask Swamiji. Throughout the day, devotees would be in and out of his room asking practical and philosophical questions. And they took up their old ways of reciprocating with him. Once again, Prabhupada was telling Achyutananda what to cook for lunch, explaining to him that an expert servant learns to anticipate what the master wants even before he asks. So Srila Prabhupada was lecturing from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he was explaining when he was flying from San Francisco, above he would see an ocean of clouds. When he was flying when he was traveling through boat, he would see an ocean of water. And ocean water.
Why don't you explain? You explain it.
So basically saying that when then it says when there's this above the clouds is the sun, but when you come down to New York, it is all dim and cloudy, but the sun is still there. So it shows how even though there's so many clouds, the clouds cannot cover the whole world. They can't cover the whole United States, which is a speck in the universe. So just like how when we fly and we see skyscrapers as very tiny, similarly from Krishna's position, all this material worlds, they're all very insignificant because it's very small. And then a new boy raises and asks, why is it that one person, one soul comes to Krishna and another doesn't? So Prabhupada replies back saying, why is one soul in the Bowery and another has come to the Krishna temple? And no one could reply back. So he said, because one wants to be here and one doesn't. And because it's a question of free will. And if we use it properly, we can go to Krishna, or else we stay in this world. And as a regular day, everyone would have something to ask Prabhupada. Throughout the day, the devotees would be in his room asking him practical or philosophical questions. And they took up their old ways of always, whenever they have a question, go into his room and asking him. And Prabhupada, once again, Achyutananda started cooking for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada told him that an expert servant would anticipate what the master wants even before he asks.
This section is primarily makes to make devotees humble, because he's comparing the Krishna as the sun. Nothing can cover, just like no cloud, it appears like cloud covers the sun, but cloud can never cover the sun. Sun is always there, but the sun doesn't have to come down tendency. It's always above the clouds. However, the living entities are always under the influence of Maya. They can come down. So he's just at the same time he's just giving that how insignificant New York, the skyscraper building, the United States, which we are so proud of it. You know, when you fly, they are insignificant. You cannot see anything. Covers.
Everyone had something to ask Swamiji. Throughout the day, devotees would be in and out of his room, asking practical and philosophical questions. And they took up their old ways of reciprocating with him. Once again, Prabhupada was telling Achyutananda what to cook for lunch and explaining to him that an expert servant learns to anticipate what is the master wants even before he asks for it. Satsarupa came into So Prabhupada the latest type manuscript for teaching of Lord Chaitanya, although there was no difference in Satsarupa's assignment. Now that he was face to face with Prabhupada, he realized he had to type and edit more seriously. He asked whether he could resign from his job at the welfare office. Prabhupada said no. Jadurani viewed painting in the outer room of Prabhupada's apartment. Casting shyness aside, she asked him many questions about how to paint Krishna. How is Lord Vishnu situated in the heart? She asked. Is he sitting or standing or what? Prabhupada replied, oh, for that you have to meditate for thousands of years. Jadurani stared at him in dismay. Then Prabhupada said, he's standing. She went off happily to paint. When Jadurani complained of weak health, Prabhupada asked Achyutananda to see that she got milk twice a day. Looking through the window that opened into the outer room, where typing, painting, and sometimes even construction went on. Prabhupada watched Jadurani one day as she worked on a painting of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana Party. Just as she started to paint the words of the Mahamantra across the bottom of the painting, Prabhupada called the window, don't put the Mahamantra there.
Hmm. Very nice. So devotees were desperately waiting Prabhupada's guidance. Yadurani had many questions, many paintings, how he want to paint, but he didn't know. This is interesting that he's asking, what, okay, how should I paint? Is he sitting? Is he situated in the heart? Is he sitting, standing, or what? Prabhupada says, you will take thousands of years meditation to know. But then he said, no, he's standing. I think he's referring to the soul, super soul painting, which in science of self-realization, if I'm not wrong. You see, and here, Sasrup also came, devotees were engaging. Sasrup Swami also came to show Prabhupada the latest type manuscripts of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So there was no difference in Sasrup's assignment. But now that he is face to face with Prabhupada, he realized he had to type and edit more seriously. He asked whether he could resign from his job at the welfare office. Prabhupada said no, because money is needed. And so Prabhupada said no to him for this. So yeah, about Prabhupada personally want to keep watch on devotees' health. He wanted to make sure that Yadurani is given twice a meal to become strong and get her health back. AJ? One more thing here. One more thing. She was painting Sankirtan movement. So this is the thing. And she said, put Mahamantra down. So you cannot put it down. In, it'll be like a touch under the feet of the devotees or the Lord, like that. So he said, not put it down. Don't put the Mahamantra there. So these are small things. We need to be very conscious of things while dealing with devotees, books, Mahamantra, any Lord's paraphernalia should not touch in any way. Yeah, please go ahead.
But you told me to put it there, she said. I've changed my mind. Hare Krishna should not be below Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One by one, Prabhupada saw all his old New York followers, Gargamuni, the temple treasurer, who reported good sales of the Hare Krishna record and incense, Rayaram, editor of Back to Godhead, who talked about his indigestion, and Rupanuga, who had a good job but was having difficulty convincing his wife about Krishna consciousness. Even Mr. Chudy, the landlord, dropped by with the complaints about the boy's behavior. Prabhupada also met Michael Bloomert, a newcomer. Michael had been seeing a psychiatrist as a result of devastating drug experiences. When he had begun coming to the temple, his mother and father had thought the Swami another evil force. On meeting Swamiji, however, Mrs. Bloomert accepted his authenticity, although her husband remained doubtful. Mr. Bloomert, Srila Prabhupada said, your wife is more intelligent. Mr. Bloomert said he wanted his son to help the world in a more practical way by becoming a doctor. Prabhupada argued that there were already so many doctors, but still people were suffering. A Krishna conscious person, however, could relieve a person's suffering completely. So the work of Krishna consciousness was more valuable. Mr. Bloomert was unconvinced, but he agreed to let Michael stay with the devotees and drop going to the psychiatrist. He came to respect the Swami, even though disagreeing with him. With Brahmananda, Prabhupada discussed the urgent problem of obtaining a permanent visa. Prabhupada had repeatedly extended his visa ever since he had entered the country in 1965. Now immigration officials denied him any further extensions. He didn't want to leave the US, but the only way he would be able to stay would be to get permanent residency. He had applied, but so far with no success. Your government doesn't want me to stay, he had said, so I may have to go back to India. Excuse me. So Prabhupada, like you're saying, he says, hey, don't put the Maha Mantra below Lord Chaitanya in that picture. He changed his mind about that, and he says nothing. It shouldn't be below Chaitanya. And then he, being back in New York, he started to see all the old followers, Gargamuni, Rayarama, who apparently has indigestion, and Rupanuga, who was having trouble convincing his wife about Krishna consciousness. And apparently the landlord is not super happy with how the boys behave at the temple, so at the storefront. So he had some complaints as well. And then it talks about, how Prabhupada met a new devotee, Michael, who was seeking medical help because he had a bad drug trip. It sounds like, and he started going to the temple, and his parents, were very skeptical. But then his mother met Prabhupada, and could see something good there. But Michael's dad still was on the fence, and Prabhupada told his dad, he said, "Hey, your wife is smarter than you. she knows I'm a good guy. She's smarter than you." And he had wanted his son to become a doctor, but Prabhupada said, "Hey, this is much more valuable than a person in Krishna consciousness can save many more people than a doctor ever will, and they're still suffering even though we have all these doctors." And then they were talking about, it gets into at the end here how he was starting to have Prabhupada was starting to run into immigration issues. He keeps extending his visa, but the immigration services finally started to deny his extension request, and he hasn't been able to get get approved for permanent residency. So it looks like he's going to be faced with potentially having to go back to India.
Cyclone proof.
Swamiji's going back to India was a frightening prospect. His disciples had barely been able to accept that he could leave them for preaching elsewhere in the US. If he were to go back to India, they feared they might fall back into the material world. He was sustaining their spiritual life. How could they go on without him? And Prabhupada felt the same way. Brahmananda managed to find a lawyer to delay the proceedings of the immigration office. The threat of deportation passed. Prabhupada spoke of going to Montreal and getting permanent residency there, but his main intention was to stay in America and cultivate what he had begun. Brahmananda reported to Prabhupada about printing the Bhagavad Gita. The manuscript was ready, and they were considering the cost and where to print it, even though they didn't have enough money to publish the book themselves. They hadn't seriously attempted the arduous process of finding a publisher, but Prabhupada pushed Brahmananda to do so. The only hope is that I have my books. Brahmananda also talked with Prabhupada about the $6,000 he had lost to Mr. Price. Prabhupada insisted that they prosecute the culprits. He sent Brahmananda to speak with various lawyers and also tell Mr. Price and Mr. Tyler that His Excellency was back and would take them to court. At that, they relented. Mr. Tyler refunded most of the $5,000 deposit, and Mr. Price returned $750 of the $1,000 he had wheedled out of Brahmananda. The legal services had cost more than $1,000, so that was lost. But Prabhupada said that when dealing with a tiger, you can expect to get scratched. So here, basically, it was a frightening prospect of Swamiji going back to India. His disciples were not yet ready. They were not. They could not carry on without them. And if he were to leave, they could also probably fall down into the material world and not stay in the spiritual life. And Prabhupada also felt the same. And then Brahmananda was able to speak to an immigration lawyer and delay the proceedings. And Prabhupada also thought of immigrating to Canada and getting a permanent residency there. But his aim was still to stay in America and preach what he had begun. And Prabhupada also pushed Brahmananda to talk to different publishers about publishing the Bhagavad Gita, because the manuscript was ready and it would be a big cost. And Prabhupada mentioned that his only hope was his books to spread Krishna consciousness. And they also talked about the $6,000. Prabhupada suggested to Brahmananda to speak with various lawyers and to inform Mr. Price and Mr. Tyler that Prabhupada was back and he would basically take them to court. And at that, looks like they gave in, and then Mr. Tyler refunded most of the $5,000, and Mr. Price returned the $750. So looks like they at least got some money back, and but the legal services and everything, it cost $1,000. And Prabhupada mentions that when you are dealing with a tiger, you can get some scratches, so you can ignore that.
Vijayanand Prabhu.
In a letter to Kirtananda in Montreal, Prabhupada described the successful termination of the price affair. You will be glad to know that I have been able to, by grace of Krishna, to recover $4,227 out of the $5,000 gone in the belly of Sir Conman fraud price. There were signs that Prabhupada should be cautious about his health. He had gone through difficulty while appearing on the Alan Burke TV show. Alan Burke was known for his sitting back, smoking a cigar, and saying outrageous, even insulting things to his guests. And if a guest became offended, Mr. Burke would provoke him all the more. It was a popular show. Before they went on the air, Mr. Burke had asked Prabhupada's permission to smoke a cigar, and Prabhupada had graciously consented. Mr. Burke had introduced his guest as a real Swami. When he had asked Prabhupada why he was against sets, Prabhupada had said that he was not. Sets should be restricted to marriage for raising Krishna conscious children. But Mr. Burke had persisted, wanting to know what was wrong with sets outside of marriage. The real purpose of human life, Srila Prabhupada had replied, was self-realization. When one's mind is preoccupied with capturing a new sex partner, keeping the mental peace necessary for self-realization becomes impossible. Mr. Burke had agreed. In fact, his manners had been the best ever, and at the end, he had called Prabhupada a very charming gentleman. It was on his home to the temple that Srila Prabhupada had said that the TV lights had caused him so much pain in his head that at one point he had thought he would not be able to continue. Then one day, Rupanuga, sitting close to Prabhupada's dais during his lecture, noticed Prabhupada's hand shaking as he spoke. Kirtananda had been there when months ago, the morning after they had made the record. Prabhupada had slept late and complained of his heart skipping and of not being able to move. If I ever get badly sick, Srila Prabhupada had told Kirtananda, don't call a doctor, don't take me to a hospital, just give me my beats and chant Hare Krishna. So, this starts with a letter which Prabhupada sent to Kirtananda, in Montreal. He had mentioned, he had successfully terminated the price affair, and he was able to get back $4,227 out of $5,000 from Mr. Price. And also, there was few incidents which indicated that Prabhupada should be cautious about his health. He has gone through some difficulty while appearing on the Alan Burke's TV show. Alan Burke was known for his sitting back, and he used to smoke a cigar, and he used to insult people on the guests. So, and in case if the guest becomes offended, he would provoke them more. And it was but still it was a popular show. And so when before they went to the show, Mr. Burke asked Prabhupada his permission to smoke a cigar, and Prabhupada had consented. And Mr. Burke introduced Prabhupada's real Swami, and he questioned him why he was against it. And Prabhupada mentioned that he was not against it, and but he mentioned that it should be restricted to the marriage for raising Krishna conscious children. And for this, Mr. Burke questioned what is wrong in the outside of marriage. And for this, Prabhupada mentioned that for self-realization and one. In case if one's mind is preoccupied with the intention of new sex partners, then the mental peace which is necessary for the self-realization will become impossible. And at the end, Mr. Burke also agreed to that, and also at the end he called Prabhupada as a very charming gentleman. And when Prabhupada was returning from the show to the temple, he had mentioned that the TV lights had caused him some pain and the head, and at one point he was not able to continue. And also a few of the devotees like Rupanuga noticed that during a lecture, Prabhupada's hand was shaking, and also one day Kirtananda also had a similar noticed similar thing. One morning when they made the record, Swamiji mentioned that he slept late, and he had a complaining of heart skipping, and also after these incidents, Swamiji mentioned that in case if he becomes sick, he asked them not to take him to the hospital. Instead, give him the chanting beads, and so that he can chant Hare Krishna.
Hope we all get some lesson from here, right? Of course, in Vedic culture, while having medicine also you remember Krishna, because medicine itself doesn't have any value. It has to be depend on the Krishna's mercy. So that's one of the point. Srikar?
Swamiji's disciples were reluctant to restrain him. Kirtananda had tried. At the Avalon, when Swamiji had been dancing and jumping and screaming with perspiration, Kirtananda had insisted that the Kirtan stop, but the others called him paranoid. Besides, Swamiji didn't like to be restrained. And who were they to restrain him? He was Krishna's empowered representatives, able to surmount any difficulty. He was a pure devotee. He could do anything. Hadn't he often described how a pure devotee is transcendental to material pangs? Swamiji had written a letter consoling a disciple's ailing grandmother. All our ailments are due to external body. Although we have to suffer sometime from bodily inconveniences, especially in the old age, still, if we are God conscious, we shall not feel the pangs. The best thing is therefore to chant the holy name of Lord constantly. The devotees figured that although Swamiji might have good instructions to someone's old grandmother, nothing like what had befallen her was even going to affect him. Of course, he referred to himself as an old man, but that was mostly in lectures to show the inevitability of old age. To the devotees, Prabhupada's health appeared strong. His eyes shone brightly with spiritual emotions, his complexion was smooth and golden, and his smile was a display of health and well-being. One time, one of the boys said that Swamiji's smile was so virile that it made him think of a bull and iron nails. Swamiji was taking cold showers, going on early morning walks around the Lower East Side, playing mridanga, eating well. Even if his disciples want to slow him down, what could they do? So here we see that all the devotees are becoming little concerned about Srila Prabhupada's health, especially Kirtananda Maharaj. So he saw it at one of the Avalons, Srila Prabhupada was dancing and jumping in the Kirtan. And then when he saw Srila Prabhupada dancing and jumping and perspiring, he insisted everybody to stop the Kirtan. But again, but the others felt that other devotees felt that Kirtananda was a little paranoid. And also Srila Prabhupada did not like to be restrained. He was like Krishna's like empowered representatives. He was a pure devotee, and then he could do anything. And then Srila Prabhupada himself used to say that pure devotees are always transcendental to the material pangs. And then once Srila Prabhupada had written a letter consoling one of his disciples' ailing grandmother. And then in that letter he mentions that all the ailments, all the external sufferings, they are only to the body. Sometimes bodily inconveniences come, especially in the old age, but still, as long as one is God conscious, they'll not feel the pangs. And then he mentions in that letter that the best thing is always to chant the holy names of the Lord. So, and also in most of the lectures, we see that Srila Prabhupada referred to himself as an old man, but that was mostly to show that the old age is inevitable and that it comes to everybody. And then, but to the devotees again, Prabhupada's health appeared strong. His eyes were like bright with spiritual emotions. His complexion was smooth and golden, and his smile was like display of his health and well-being. And then one time again, one of the boys, when he saw Srila Prabhupada's smile, he said that his smile made him think of a bull and iron nails. And then, but again, Srila Prabhupada would follow his normal routine. He would take cold showers, wake up early in the morning, go for morning walks, play mridanga and eat well. Even if his disciples wanted to slow him down, they could not do anything.
Some of his disciples had actually tried to prevent him from attending the controversial cosmic Lavan at the East Village Theatre, but not because of his health. They had wanted to protect his US residency case. Srila Prabhupada had been invited to attend the Lavan, a fundraising show for US Abolafia, the Love and Peace presidential candidate. Allen Ginsberg, Timothy Leary, and others were attending along with a full lineup of rock bands. But when Prabhupada's lawyer heard that he was going, he said it might jeopardize the visa case. Some of the boys took up the lawyer's opinion and opposed Prabhupada's plan. Prabhupada agreed that it might be best if he didn't go. But on the day of the cosmic lovin, he changed his mind and decided to go anyway. I came to this country to preach Krishna consciousness, he declared. Now it was time to speak against these LSD leaders who claim to be spiritualists. He had been saying that although he wanted to go, he wouldn't go if his disciples forbade him. But in the end, he simply said he was going. And that was that. During the last week of May, Srila Prabhupada began to feel exhausted. He spoke of heart palpitations. Hoping that the symptoms would clear up in a day or two, Kirtananda requested Prabhupada to rest and see no visitors. But Prabhupada's condition became worse. Kirtananda. Swamiji began to complain that his left arm wasn't functioning properly. And then he began to develop a twitching in his left side, and his left arm would twitch uncontrollably. It seemed to pain him in some mysterious way, internally or psychologically. So, Prabhupada wanted to attend the Lovin Fest at the East Village Theatre, but some of his disciples were preventing him for attending that fest. Even his, even his Prabhupada lawyer insisted not to go because of his visa case. But again, Prabhupada decided that he came to US to preach Krishna consciousness, so he declared that he would go in any way. But again, and he said that it is now the time to speak against these LSD leaders who claim to be the spiritualists. But again, he says that if disciples would forbade him, he wouldn't go. But at the end, he simply said that he was going, and that's it. And during the last week of May, Prabhupada began to feel exhausted. Like he said that he had heart palpitations, and Kirtananda was hoping that his symptoms would disappear in a day or two, and asked Prabhupada to rest, and said that he wouldn't see any visitors. But Prabhupada's condition was becoming worsened. So Kirtananda said that Swamiji was complaining about his left arm not functioning properly, and uh, he began to develop twitching in his left side, and his left arm would twitch uncontrollably. So this pain seemed to Prabhupada in some mysterious way, like internally or psychologically.
Thank you. Prasanthi?
Achyutananda. It was Sunday, 2 days before Memorial Day, and we had arranged a large program in the afternoon in a town hall uptown. I went up to get Swamiji since all the devotees were ready. Swamiji was lying down and his face was pale. He said, "Feel my heart," and I felt a quivering vibration in his chest. I went down, but didn't want to alert everyone and panic them. I went to Kirtananda and quietly said, "The Swami is having some kind of mild heart palpitations." And immediately we both flew back up. Swamiji said, "Just massage here." So I rubbed him on the chest and he showed me how. He said, "The others go and Achyutananda can stay here. If anything happens, he can call you." So the others went and did the program and waited. Once or twice he called me in and had me quickly rub over his chest. And then he looked up and his color had come back. I was starting with I was staring with my mouth open, wondering what to do. He looked at me and said, "Why are you sitting idle? Chant Hare Krishna." During the evening, palpitations again occurred. So I slept in the next room. I slept in the room next to his. And late at night, he called me in and again he had me massage. Kirtanananda. It was on Tuesday afternoon, Memorial Day. I was sitting with Swamiji in his room. While Kirtana was going on downstairs, the twitching began again. Swamiji's face began to tighten up. His eyes started rolling. Then all of a sudden he threw himself back and I caught him. He was gasping Hare Krishna and then everything stopped. I thought it was the last until his breath started again and with it the chanting. But he did not regain control over his body. Brahmananda. I was there along with Kirtanananda. It was on the Memorial Day weekend. We couldn't understand what was wrong with Swamiji. He couldn't sit up, he was moaning, and nobody knew what was happening. We nursed him, myself and Kirtanananda, trying all different things. I had to go out and buy a bedpan for him. In the last week of May, Prabhupada, after feeling exhausted, he spoke of heart palpitations, and they were waiting that the symptoms would go away, but and he requested Prabhupada not to see anyone, but the condition became worse. And Kirtananda explains that he complained of the left arm not functioning properly and twitching on the left side uncontrollably, and his pain was in a mysterious way. Nakshatananda explains that it was Sunday, 2 days before the Memorial Day. They arranged a large program, and all the devotees were ready to see him. Swamiji was lying down, his face was pale, and he asked him to feel his heart. They were there. He can feel the vibrations in his chest. And then he went down and did not alert anyone else other than Kirtanananda. And they both massaged his chest and then attended him. And Prabhupada asked Achyutananda to stay back, and if anything happens, then he can alert other people. And so the others waited. They continued the program, and the devotee he rubbed over the chest and massaged and tried to help in whatever way he can do. And he was not chanting Hare Krishna, and Prabhupada asked him to chant. And he stayed with him overnight, where Prabhupada asked him to massage him again. Kirtananda explains the Memorial Day scene. Prabhupada was in his room while the Kirtan was going downstairs, and he started to feel the same again, like his twitching and pain, and his face tightening up, his eyes started rolling, and he collapsed, and Kirtananda caught him. And then after he thought that he is no more, but the breathing started again after some time, and he regained his consciousness. Brahmananda explains that Kirtananda, he was there along with Kirtanananda on the Memorial Day weekend, and Prabhupada couldn't sit. He was moaning, and they both nursed him, and he also went to get a bedpan for Prabhupada.
That's amazing, isn't it? So we should meditate on all these incident situations, how Prabhupada acted in different situations. All his attempts, and if you notice that he's always focusing on good and bad times, you chant Hare Krishna. You know, we don't want, he didn't want devotees to sit like dumb. So Nipa, you please read it.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada's left side was paralyzed. He asked that a picture of his spiritual master be put on the wall in front of him. Thinking that Prabhupada was preparing to leave his body and wanted to meditate at the last moment on his spiritual master, Achinananda taped into the door facing Prabhupada. Devotees entered the front room of the apartment and Prabhupada told them to chant Hare Krishna. Then he told them to pray to Krishna in his form of Narsimha Deva, Satya Swarupa. Swamiji said we should pray to Lord Narsimha and the prayer should be my master has not finished his work. At different times he would allow us to take turns and massage different parts of his body. Then he had us to go downstairs and hold kirtana through the night. Jadurani. He taught us the prayers to Lord Narsimha Deva. He said the words one by one, and I wrote them down. I called up the temples in San Francisco and Montreal and told them the prayer. Swamiji said you should pray to Krishna that my spiritual master has not yet completed his work, so please let him finish. Damodara. I went into the temple. No one was downstairs, so I just sat down to chant some rounds. Then a devotee came down looking very disturbed. So I asked what was going on. When he told me, I rushed upstairs. Everyone was sitting around in the second room, where they could see into Swamiji's room through the window in the wall. They were all chanting on their beads. Jadurani was handing out little slips of paper with writing on them. Swamiji, she explained, wanted us to chant these prayers. So here it says that Swamiji's left side was paralyzed and left side, and he asked that the picture of his spiritual master be put up in front of him. And thinking that Prabhupada is preparing to leave his body and wanted to meditate on his spiritual master, Achinanta put the taped the picture onto the door facing Prabhupada. Devotees started entering the front room of the apartment and there's some noise. Prabhupada told them to chant Hare Krishna. Then he told them to pray Krishna in the form of Narsimha Deva. Satya Swarupa says, Swamiji said we should pray Lord Narsimha and prayers should be saying, my master has not finished his work. At different times, they would take turns to massage different parts of Prabhupada's body. And they had gone downstairs and hold kirtana throughout the night. Jadurani says, Prabhupada taught us the prayers to Lord Narsimha and he said the words and wrote them down. Jadurani called temples in San Francisco and Montreal and told them the same prayer. So Amji said we should pray that Krishna, my spiritual master, has not completed his work, so please let him finish. Damodara went into the temple. No one was downstairs, so Damodara sat down to chant some rounds. Then a devotee came looking very disturbed and asked what was going on. When he told that the devotee rushed upstairs. Everyone was sitting around in the second room where they could see Swamiji through a window. They were all chanting on the beads. Jadurani was handling the papers with writing on them. Swamiji had explained to chant these prayers. That would be all.
Thank you. Yeah, Brajespuri, please read.
Yes, Prabhu. Brahmananda, we brought the painting of Lord Narsimha into Swamiji's room and we were all chanting. When Swamiji had to use the bad pen in front of Lord Narsimha's painting, he begged forgiveness of Lord Narsimha. He could understand that Lord Narsimha was sitting right in front of him. I saw it as a painting, but Swamiji saw it as Lord Narsimha himself sitting there. It was getting worse, total weakness and everything. I couldn't get a doctor because it was a memorial day and everything was closed. I even called my family doctor, but he wasn't in. Everyone had gone on vacation because on Memorial Day, everyone leaves the city. I couldn't get anyone. I was calling hospitals, doctors, trying this and that, but I couldn't get anyone. Finally, I got a doctor by calling an emergency number for the New York City Medical Department. The doctor came. He was an old geezer with a real loud voice. When he saw Swamiji, he said, I think the old man is praying too much. I think he should get some exercise. He should go out for a walk in the morning. Achyutananda. The doctor didn't know very much. He said that Swamiji had a cold. I said, what do you mean? His heart is palpitating. I don't know what to do. Does he take any whiskey? I said, he doesn't even drink coffee or tea. Oh, very good, very good. Well, I think he has just got a cold. Dwarkadish Das. He came and took a look at the place, and you could tell right away he didn't like what he saw. He thought we were just a bunch of hippies. He couldn't wait to get out of the place. But he said, oh, he's got influenza. That was a ridiculous diagnosis. And then he said, give me my money. We paid him, the doctor left, and Swamiji got worse. The devotees called a second doctor who came and diagnosed Srila Prabhupada as having had a mild heart attack. He said that Prabhupada should at once go to the hospital. Max Lerner, a lawyer friend of the devotees. I got a call one day that Swami had a mild heart attack and I could be of some help. At the time, they were going to take him to Bellevue Hospital, but I suggested that at least I could try to get him into a private hospital. After several hours of talking and negotiating with people at the hospital, we were able to get Swamiji to Beth Israel Hospital. So Prabhupada's situation over here is not been understood by anyone. So Brahmananda Prabhu is he's saying that Prabhupada saw the Lord Narasimha in the photo frame itself. So that was the vision Prabhupada had, the devotion he had. And then the whole story is there, that how the pain got worse and they were trying to call different doctors, and one doctor came up and that doctor started he could not understand what was going on and he was guessing different things. He was thinking that the people staying there are hippies, and he's asking funny questions about having whiskey and all those things. And devotees like, what? He's not having tea or coffee. What to speak of such kind of things? So that doctor was a fake doctor. They realized, and another doctor came and he said that it's a mild heart attack, and that's where they called up Max Lerner, a lawyer friend of the devotees. And that's where he realized, Max Lerner, that there is some help he can do for Swamiji. And suggested that they should take him to Bellevue Hospital. And okay, they were going to take to Bellevue Hospital, and he suggested that he should go into a private hospital. Right.
Yes.
So this was the situation Prabhupada was living in. Very precarious situation.
So we learned that how we can utilize our time by fulfilling Prabhupada's incomplete mission while we are in good health. Thank you. AJ, please read. AJ? AJ, can you hear? Okay, Cycling Pro, you can do.
Brahmananda, the day after Memorial Day, we had to arrange for an ambulance. Beth Israel had no ambulance, so I called a private ambulance company. It was all arranged with the hospital that Swamiji would arrive at 9 o'clock that morning, but the ambulance did not come until about noon. During this time, Swamiji kept moaning. Then finally, the ambulance came, and they were terrible. They were horrible guys. They treated Swamiji like a bundle of cloth. I thought it would have been better if we had taken Swamiji in a cab. Except for Kirtananda, who stayed in Prabhupada's hospital as a nurse, no one else was allowed to stay. They all went back to the temple to chant through the night as Prabhupada had requested. Kirtananda phoned Hayagriva in San Francisco and told him what had happened. How Swamiji had suddenly fallen back and cried out, Hare Krishna, and how there had been nothing for about 30 seconds and then a big gasp, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Kirtananda told Hayagriva that the devotees in San Francisco should chant all night and pray to Lord Narasimha. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Lord Narasimha Dev, the half-lion incarnation of Lord Krishna, had appeared in another age to save his pure devotee Prahlad and kill the demon Hiranyakashipu. Prabhupada had asked his disciples to pray to Lord Narasimha Dev by chanting the special mantra and thinking, our master has not finished his work. Please protect him. The boys went back to the temple and chanted together, but after a few hours they fell asleep. They wanted to rest so that they could go to the hospital the next day. Haridas, when we heard about it in San Francisco, there was grief and people were crying. There was a tremendous love and thinking about Swamiji and just concentration, a mass concentration of pulling him through, giving him strength and summoning the help of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya and everybody we could possibly call upon to lend their energies. People came into the temple doing rosaries and whatever faiths or beliefs or trips they were on, they were directing that toward healing. They were all chanting with us. So here, the devotees basically after the day of the Memorial Day, they arranged an ambulance to take Prabhupada to Beth Israel. There was no ambulance, so they had to book it via a private ambulance company. And basically, they were supposed to go to the hospital at 9, but the ambulance did not come until noon. And Prabhupada was still in pain during that time. And they did not even properly handle Prabhupada. And Brahmananda thinks it would have been better, says it would have been better if they had taken Prabhupada in a cab. And only Kirtananda was allowed to stay. And the rest of the folks, they came back to the temple and they chanted to the night. Prabhupada had requested them. Kirtananda spoke to Hayagriva in San Francisco and they told what happened, and basically they asked everyone in San Francisco to chant and basically offer Lord Narasimha prayers. And Prabhupada told them that Lord Narasimhadev had come to save Prahlad, his devotee Prahlad, from Hiranyakashipu, and he asked them to pray to Lord Narasimhadev to protect Prabhupada from this disease, and then basically from the heart attack, and then pray that Prabhupada had not finished his work, and basically he wanted everyone to pray to Lord Narasimhadev. The devotees in New York came to the temple. They chanted for some time, but they fell asleep because they wanted to go to the hospital the next day. When in San Francisco, when Haridas and everyone heard it, they were all very sad and they were crying. There was a lot of love and thinking about Swamiji, and then basically everyone was praying. They were asking for Krishna's and Lord Chaitanya's help so that they could give their energies to Prabhupada to help him recover. And they were all chanting for that.
Thank you. AJ, please.
Sorry about that. I lost my screen, but now I'm good. I couldn't unmute. I agree that it's a night I'll never forget. We turn on the altar lights behind the Jagannath's, light candles and chant in the flickering shadows. It is solemn chanting and even more solemn dancing. News quickly spreads down Haight Street, and soon the temple is crowded with others come to chant with us through the night. Mukunda and Janaki phone New York, but there is no additional information. Kirtananda is spending the night in the hospital beside Swamiji's bed. No one else is being allowed in. Hospital regulations. Yes, everyone in New York is chanting. We chant past midnight. Most of the guests leave, but none of us yet feel sleepy. The chanting overtakes us in waves. My mind wanders to Swamiji, to New York, to the future, to the past. I have to yank it back into the room to confront the present, to realize why we are here chanting, to petition Sri Krishna to spare our master a little longer, to allow him to spread Lord Chaitanya's glorious Sankirtan movement around the world. The chanting is always here, insistent. By 2 a.m., I begin to tire. I change instruments just to keep awake, sometimes playing madringa, sometimes cymbals or harmonium. Many dance to stay awake. The girls serve prasadam, sliced apples. It is dangerous to sit next to the wall, an invitation to doze off. We are so frail. Hare Krishna soothes. The chanting releases us from so much needless fretting. Through it, we can relieve tensions, grieve, plead, and hope. It is between 3 and 4 a.m., the most ecstatic hour, the Brahma Muhurta hour before the dawn. If he is alive at this hour, surely he will live. We sing, we chant on beads, constant Hare Krishna. We chant through the usual 7 a.m. kirtan hour and into the morning. We chant 14 hours without cessation. We cleanse the dust from the mind's mirror. We see Krishna and Swamiji everywhere. Surely now he is well. I don't know if you need to summarize that one. He says it pretty succinctly and much better than I'll be able to. But I mean,
it's always good to hear from you.
Yeah,
so you can explain in future well.
Yeah, well, I mean, he just talks about how they chanted for 14 hours and just kind of the waves of ecstasy, but also the grief that they were feeling, and the power of chanting Hare Krishna, and how it relieved tensions and relieved that grief and gave them hope, and and they were crying out to Krishna to intervene, to give Prabhupada a little more time on earth to continue to spread the message. They weren't ready for him to leave yet. They needed a little more help from him, and he needed a little more time to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission.
Thank you. Prasanthi, please.
We sing, we chant on beads, constant Hare Krishna. We chant through the usual 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Kirtan hour and into the morning. We chant 14 hours without cessation. We cleanse the dust from the mind's mirror. We see Krishna and Swamiji everywhere. Surely now he's well. During the night, Srila Prabhupada heart pained him. The next day, he remained in critical condition. He could speak but softly and was too exhausted to converse. Skeptical of doctors, he diagnosed himself a heart attack affecting part of his brain, thus paralyzing the left side of his body. Massage, he said, was the cure. On the morning of June 1, other disciples joined Kirtanananda in Prabhupada's room, and by taking shifts were able to give Prabhupada a constant massage. They took turns massaging his head, chest, legs as he directed. This simple act drew each of them into an intimate relationship with him. When Prabhupada heard that not only in New York but in San Francisco also the devotees had chanted and prayed all night, he expressed satisfaction, not by his usual hearty smile, but by a very slight nodding and an approving sound. Despite his weakness, he was fully conscious. The doctors, or more often than their aides, took blood, gave injections, and investigated. Their diagnosis wasn't conclusive. They had plans for experiments. Then suddenly a doctor came in and announced their next move, a spinal tap. Prabhupada was too weak to discuss the pros or cons of a spinal tap. He had put himself in the care of his disciples and Krishna. The doctor didn't want to be impeded. He explained why a spinal tap was necessary, but he wasn't asking for consultation or permission. Everyone except for Kirtanananda, who insisted on staying, had to leave the room while the doctor performed the spinal tap. Neither Prabhupada, who was too weak, nor his boys, who were uncertain how to act on his behalf, opposed the doctor. The devotees filed out of Prabhupada's room while the doctor read at the largest, frightening, most frightening needle they had ever seen. When they were allowed back, one disciple asked cautiously, "Did it hurt, Swamiji?" Srila Prabhupada, his golden skinned form wrapped in white hospital garments and lying between the white sheets, turned slightly and said, "We are tolerant." So the devotees continued their kirtan for 14 hours for the whole night, and they felt that it cleansed the dust of their mind's mirror, and they can see Krishna and Swamiji everywhere. Prabhupada was still in pain. He was in critical condition, and he was not able to converse with the devotees. He's exhausted, and the doctors were unable to diagnose what was going on. But Prabhupada felt that the cure was massage. So devotees started taking turns and massaging his head, chest, legs as he directed. And they felt some intimate relationship with him, serving him. When Prabhupada heard that devotees in New York and San Francisco chanted overnight, he expressed his satisfaction by nodding. And he is fully conscious, though very weak. Doctors gave him injections, investigated, but the diagnosis was inconclusive, and they were experimenting. And the devotees were not sure, and and Prabhupada was too weak to discuss about the pros and cons of the spinal tap. A doctor gave the spinal tap. Was only Kirtanananda was there, and others have to go out. And he gave spinal tap with a very big needle. And the rest of the devotees asked if Prabhupada was in pain, and for that Prabhupada replied, "We are tolerant."
Thank you so much. It's how wonderful Prabhupada could diagnose his own issue. He said that it's because of the heart attack, paralysis, and not communicating with the brain. So massage. He also in one medical field. So let's see. It is a bad situation, and when I'm reading, I feel that I'm sure all of you feeling that you're presently experiencing this situation, so what Prabhupada has gone through. And as an Acharya, he's teaching with his own example. These are all we understand that Lord's arrangement for the devotees to learn. He was teaching to the devotees all the situation. And because he said that make me dance as you like. So at the ship itself, he said that I'm surrendering to you. You do, this body belongs to you, do whatever you want. In one sense, all these incidents, situations are as a learning session, educating people, the devotees. Actually. Thank you so much for joining. We will continue tomorrow. We'll end it here. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada Lilamrt ki jai. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare